Basically, the feedback principle is just that students get a better grasp of information and are more motivated to learn when teachers provide effective feedback. So that's the principle there, that the students learn better when you provide effective feedback. So kind of what you guys were saying. Basically, feedback helps learners maximize their potential at different stages of learning, raise their awareness of strengths and areas they need improvement, as well as identify actions to be taken to improve different kinds of performance.
When providing effective feedback, there's 7 principles to keep in mind. The first one is to help clarify what good performance is. You can do this by being elaborate in your explanation of what the student does well or what the student needs to improve on. The second principle is to facilitate the development of self-assessment and learning. You can do this by allowing the student to go back and review their answers after providing the feedback. The third one is to deliver high-quality information to the students about learning. This, in other words, means to be specific in the feedback that you're providing back to the student, not being very general, being very specific on what you want them to improve upon or what they did well. The fourth one is to encourage teacher and peer dialogue about learning. This just helps promote good relationships with you and your students. Number 5 is encourage positive motivational belief and self-esteem. In order to do this, you don't want to knock them down with negative constructive criticism or being too harsh. You want to improve their self-esteem and give them the goals to achieve by doing feedback. Number 6 is provide opportunities to close the gap between current performance and desired performance. This means you want the student to realize where they are now and where they're going to be and how you're going to help them get there. And then the last one is provide information to teachers that can be used to help shape teaching. This is kind of reiterating the student giving you feedback in order to help improve your own teaching methods.
There's 2 different types. There's formal feedback and informal feedback. Informal is the rubrics and standards that the students are trying to achieve, grades and grade books, having conferences. And informal feedback is just hey, good job, just being there and being kind of supportive in that way. And the day-to-day encounters that aren't necessarily something that would be on a rubric or something, just writing good job on paper or something like that, are more forms of informal feedback.
And it's important to kind of use both of them throughout your teaching experience so that you make sure that they can, they're both effective in different ways, because informal is usually more immediate and then formal usually is more elaborative, so it's important to be using both of those in your teaching.
And here's an example of giving bad feedback, I guess you'd say. So let's say the scenario is a student completes their time test, we all took them when we were younger, in under a minute. So ineffective feedback would be saying, good job, next time I'll give you more math problems to do. And effective feedback would be more elaborate, saying I noticed that you completed your time test in under a minute. What an amazing accomplishment. Have you been practicing outside of school? And yeah, so the teacher clearly didn't state or reiterate in the bad feedback, just saying hey, good job, I'll give you more problems. So the teacher really didn't state what the student did well. It was just hey, good job. Whereas if you say what an amazing accomplishment, you completed your time test in under a minute, that's really explain and elaborate feedback, so they know exactly what they did well. And being sincere is the good job versus what an amazing accomplishment of you completing your test. And the student didn't ask what they were doing better to better prepare themselves for the test, whereas in the effective feedback they said have you been practicing outside of school, or did you feel more prepared for this test, stuff like that, rather than just saying oh, I'll give you more problems next time. So that's kind of good feedback versus bad feedback.
There are multiple tools that you can use in the classroom to provide feedback. Digital tools allow for collaboration, learning, and productivity, and the biggest thing that's handy about having digital tools as a form of feedback is it's mostly instantaneous, as opposed to having to wait to hand back papers with your feedback on it. Some of the feedback that we have found super effective are Google Drive, Google Handout, Google+, and Google Classroom. Some other ones include Classkick, Formative, Skype, and Today's Meet. These websites allow collaboration between teachers and students for instantaneous feedback, which promotes learning. For the rest of our presentation, we had the students perform an assignment on GoFormative.com, which was one of the tools we talked about to provide feedback in the classroom. They went to Formative.com and used our access code to access questions about feedback principle.
This is what the assignment looked like after the students went to GoFormative.com and typed in our access code. This is what the page looked like where they were to answer these questions. And this website allows us as the teachers to go and look at their answers and digitally provide them instant feedback.
In the following clips, we will be showing how we provided feedback to the students who performed this assignment in our real-life classroom group teaching project. I can go ahead and tell her what kind of grade she got, so around a 6, because it's important to know that the feedback principle is not just how to give feedback, but the fact that effective feedback improves learning. And so a lot of you did things like that. And so if you guys were registered as my students, that you would have in your typical classroom, I would be able to click on Logan's and say something that would be an effective feedback, using the effective feedback that we told you guys about, would say, this answer is on the right track. Don't forget to include how feedback affects learners, things like that.
And something to keep in mind with a website like this, say, I know not every school is one-to-one, but if it was and the students were allowed to take technology home, you could assign something like this to do over the weekend or overnight, and the teacher could be at home giving the feedback. So it's very nice to have it digital, I guess. It's a lot more instantaneous rather than having to fill out a rubric and waiting a couple days to get your results back and giving feedback. Using something like this provides